Blue. Cages and crossroads. Release from the system. Freedom felt foreign. The boy, now a man at 18, stepped out of the system's grip with empty pockets and a head full of swirling memories. His childlike face betrayed the scars of lost years. He looked around, but the world he left behind at 14 had aged faster than him. Mercy, still the jungle, felt colder. There was no grand welcome, no homies slapping him on the back. People changed, hustles evolved, but the grind never stopped. He felt the weight of responsibility on him now, heavier than the chains the system had put on him. His firstborn, the son, was barely walking when he last saw him. The girl, his girl, she was just a child too, hadn't written in years. They weren't kids anymore, and he had missed too much. He'd missed his first steps, first words. He wasn't about to miss much more. But time didn't forgive. The streets certainly wouldn't. A daughter and destiny. He got word of his daughter 2 months after being reloaded back into society. His second kid, birthed into a world that didn't love him, let alone her. She lived with her mother, a woman who wanted nothing to do with him anymore. And why should she? He was just another ghost from the past, another black man swallowed by the system, spit out with nothing to offer but broken promises. The pressure was real. Being a father, a man, and someone who wasn't supposed to live past 18 in this jungle weighed on his spirit. His daughter's face flickered in his mind as he leaned against the brick walls of his block. She deserved better. But how? There were no opportunities, no jobs waiting for him. So, when the streets came calling, whispers of quick cash, dirty money, he didn't flinch. It wasn't a choice. It was survival. Page 3, into the game. The old heads were gone. The streets had a new generation of hustlers. The crack that once flooded the projects was still there, but the game had changed. Cats were getting smarter, moving quieter. He picked up on the signals fast, catching the rhythm of the hustle like he was never gone. He fell in with the right crew, moving weight under the radar. Nothing loud, nothing flashy, just enough to stay afloat, enough to take care of his seed. His first deal wasn't a big one, but it was enough to pay for his daughter's birthday cake. A small win, but to him, it felt monumental. Like he was finally reclaiming control of a life that had been stolen from him. But it wasn't enough. It never was. Page 4, Darkness Rising. As the money trickled in, so did the violence. The streets didn't care about his kids or the redemption he sought. All they saw was another young cat trying to climb. Jealousy, desperation, these were the elements that killed brothers where they stood. It wasn't long before a robbery went sideways. His boy got hit, left bleeding out in the same project hallways where they'd grown up. That was the first time he questioned the game. Was this all worth it? The money, the status, the fear in people's eyes when they looked at him? Or was it all just a countdown to another cage, another bullet? But every time he tried to walk away, his daughter's face pulled him back in. He was doing this for her. He was doing this so she wouldn't grow up hungry, watching her daddy get beaten by the system. The turn to pimping. The turning point came one cold night. The drugs weren't enough, and he found himself deep in conversations with women, beautiful women who were tired of getting their cut from low-level hustlers. He saw a new angle. The allure of quick, consistent cash drew him into the pimp game. But this wasn't the movies. There was no glamour, no power that came with it, just control, and control was fragile. The women he worked with had stories too. Stories that mirrored his own. Broken homes, broken dreams, all trying to survive in a world that was built to watch them fail. But there was money in the trade, and he needed that. He built a small empire off the backs of their hustle, keeping things tight and as respectful as the streets allowed. Still, he couldn't shake the guilt. His mama didn't raise him to treat women like this, but his world never cared about what she taught him. It was about the now. It was about survival. But every time he tucked a stack of cash into his daughter's savings, a piece of his soul eroded. Crossroads. He knew it wouldn't last. The streets never gave you forever, just moments. And one day, the choices he made would come back to haunt him. Whether it was a bullet, the police, or karma catching up, he felt it in his bones. But until then, he was stuck between two cages, the system that shaped him and the streets that saved him. For now, though, he chose the streets. Because in the jungle, it's eat or be eaten. And he wasn't going back to being prey. Chapter continuation: The weight of choices. The rise of a reputation. The streets of Brooklyn were a war zone. Not the kind you saw on the news, but one quieter, quicker. Crack vials glittered like broken glass on the corners, the remnants of deals that were as routine as breathing. Buildings towered like concrete graves, filled with ghosts of a time before welfare checks and dope swallowed the soul of the people. These were the same projects Blue had grown up in, but now, as a man, he moved through them with a different weight. Mercy Projects in the early 90s was a place where dreams came to die. You didn't just hear about death, you saw it. Blue could still remember being a kid, peeking out the window with wide eyes as the older heads lined up on the stoops, rolling dice and hustling. Now he was one of them, his name spoken with both fear and respect. Blue's reputation had grown, not just as a hustler, but as a man who controlled the flow of money and people. His women walked the streets with a swagger, knowing they had his protection. He wasn't a brute like Dion, his biggest rival, who thought with his fists and kept his women in line through fear. Blue knew that fear was powerful, but respect lasted longer. And in a place where black men had been turned into ghosts of their former selves, Blue was something more, a king in a kingdom that was crumbling, but still his. But the truth. Control was an illusion. Family ties. Blue's apartment wasn't much, bare walls, the few pieces of second-hand furniture, and the faint scent of damp lingering in the air. The tiny window in the living room barely let in any light, but it gave him a view of the streets below. From here, he could watch the dealers and hustlers scurry back and forth like rats in a maze, trading poison for survival. This was the world he was trapped in. He had a daughter now, a little girl who didn't understand the darkness swirling around her. Blue had been with her mother since they were kids, but the crack era had sucked the life out of her too. The welfare checks kept her fed, but the system had done more than just provide, it had replaced Blue's presence in her life. He was a ghost to her now, just like his own father had been before him. Every time he held his daughter, it felt like the weight of the streets was heavier. She looked up at him with eyes too innocent for the world she was born into. She didn't know about the bodies, the deals, the way her father moved through this broken city. And Blue? He prayed she never would. Tensions boiled over. Blue had been hearing whispers for weeks. Dion was pushing up on his territory, promising his women more money, more protection, all in exchange for their loyalty. But Dion wasn't like Blue, he ran his game with violence.